So, a report came out today that Donald Trump has assured European leaders that his administration will continue military support for Ukraine once he takes office. Trump also apparently believes that supplying weapons to Ukraine after the ceasefire is in line with the idea of, quote, peace through strength. However, at the same time, Trump still believes that Ukraine should never become a NATO member and wants an immediate end to the war. Now, during his campaign, Trump actually questioned the financial burden of aiding Ukraine and called for greater European involvement, but now he plans to maintain U.S. military support. That being said, it is worth understanding what is happening here. Donald Trump's approach to arming Ukraine is designed to strengthen his negotiating position with Russian President Vladimir Putin by leveraging increased military support to compel Russia towards peace talks. This strategy involves providing Ukraine with substantial military aid, including advanced weaponry, to enhance its defense capabilities against Russia's aggression. Now, the objective is to pressure Russia into negotiations by demonstrating the United States' commitment to Ukraine's defense and its willingness to escalate support if necessary. But it's not all about pressure on Russia. Trump has expressed concern over some Ukrainian tactics, like long-range missile strikes on Russian soil, calling them counterproductive. Trump wants to be seen as a mediator in this situation, and he wants to shape the conflict's direction by leveraging the weaknesses of both sides. A detailed plan presented to Trump by his advisors outlines a conditional approach. If Russia refuses to engage in peace talks, the U.S. will escalate arms supplies to Ukraine. Conversely, if Ukraine declines negotiations themselves, military aid would be withheld. This tactic aims to bring both parties to the negotiating table by manipulating the flow of military assistance as leverage. Now, the problem arises when neither side is willing to negotiate because, honestly, neither Putin nor Zelensky are happy with the current state of the war, and both have emphatically said as much. Trump can't give more weapons and take away weapons from Ukraine just as he sees fit. That's just not going to work. So perhaps he takes a hybrid approach, which is to limit weapons to Ukraine while simultaneously increasing sanctions on Russia. Now, potential Russian measures that could be taken include expanding sanctions on Russian metals, seizing frozen assets to support Ukraine, targeting the shadow fleet with stricter insurance requirements, imposing secondary sanctions on foreign institutions that are aiding Russia, tightening export controls on high-tech goods, and even potentially designating Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. I don't necessarily think those things are on the table for the Trump administration, but those are levers that Trump can pull if he so chooses. But basically, Trump is saying, if you don't play ball with what I want, I will make it painful for both of you, both Ukraine and Russia. And America has the power to do that. But honestly, in that case, the U.S. is just isolating itself as an unserious player because they're being confrontational to both sides. Ukraine still does have Europe as a partner, and we haven't seen the depths to which Putin will take Russia. Nonetheless, most Americans and European leaders that Trump wants to work with still support bolstering Ukraine's military strength, and that will play a part in Trump's thinking. So, as Trump seeks to alter the strategic calculus for Putin by making continued aggression more costly and less sustainable, he may put his heel on Russia more so than Ukraine. Regardless, I doubt what Trump wants will be favorable for either Russia or Ukraine, which means a tenuous and likely temporary ceasefire, not an actual peace. Trump also understands that this isn't just a fight about the borders of Ukraine and Russia. It's about the global influence that is presented by Russia, the United States, China, etc. Supporting Ukraine keeps Russia isolated and prevents Putin from spinning any narrative of a waning American influence in Europe, something Trump certainly wants to counter. By urging NATO allies to increase their defense spending to 5% of GDP, Trump is putting pressure on Europe to carry more of the burden so he can get the United States to focus more on China. Despite the accusations that Trump may be in bed with Putin, this scenario is actually worse for Putin. Continuing the war means facing a Ukraine that's better armed and backed by a U.S. NATO-led coalition. Agreeing to negotiations means that Putin might possibly have to concede territory and influence, something that he has resisted at every turn. Now, Trump's willingness to sustain or even escalate aid puts Putin in an impossible position, either bleed out on the battlefield or back down at the negotiating table. Meanwhile, Ukraine does have other supporters in Europe, as I've said. Trump is also cognizant of how this looks for relations with China. Does the U.S. acquiesce to Russia and thus embolden China? Not really sure, but Trump is a staunch China hawk and likely will do anything to keep China concerned. Ultimately, Trump's shift on Ukraine reflects a broader strategy to not only counter Russia, but honestly to reassert U.S. dominance in shaping global security. While Trump's policies are far from perfect, this recalibration offers cautious hope to me, a step away from his previous and absolutist no weapons for Ukraine stance. I may be too optimistic here, but Trump may see the prospect of reasserting U.S. and by proxy his personal dominance as just too tempting at this point. So by tying weapons to his broader goals and using them to pressure Putin, Trump has a chance to push for an outcome that aligns with his and U.S. interests alike. It also could potentially protect Ukraine's future and might just leave Russia isolated and weakened. We will see, and again, I might be just a bit too optimistic here, but this evolving change from Trump is something to be hopeful about moving forward.